What is going on, shrimp keepers? So we are currently at the YTFS meeting. We got Lisa in the background. We got a ton going on, like just crazy. Cory's getting all set up. He's doing pictures with everybody on his Polaroid, and it's gonna be good. He's doing fancy guppies, my desert island fish. So it'll be cool to watch this. I'm excited for the talk. We got a lot. The house is getting crowded, which is a good thing. There's Cory right back there, and so it should be a good talk. So I'm gonna record as much of it as I can, and then hopefully we'll get that up later on.
So who has seen me before? Anyone?
Oh yeah.
All right. Yeah. All right, there's two. No, there's. Today, I'm glad to speak about guppies. I offer a few talks to the clubs. I always say, what do you want me to talk about? And usually they want puffers or something like that. And I was allowed to speak about guppies, which is my favorite fish in the world. And the color and all the cool things about guppies. And so it is my desert island fish. If I was stuck on a desert island, I would bring guppies, even to eat. They would support me. I would eat them. I'd lose some weight, but I would enjoy them, and I could breed them and eat them if I really had to. So that's why it's my desert island fish. 'Cause I can't do that with any of my other cool pets, but guppies are. For a while, I went through a big phase where I was actually collecting what's called the heirloom strains, and that was all the stuff that would have been popular in the 70s and stuff like that. Way less color, but you got to see the evolution of guppies. And so, like, in my opinion, this has built my business, and that is guppies. Whether it's my online presence, my store, I started with a couple of tanks. I fell in love with guppies. I started breeding them. I was able to start selling them at a slight profit. Not a lot. I wasn't getting rich instantly, but that allowed me to buy another tank, and pretty soon you got 50 tanks, and you know how to run a fish room, and then maybe you're crazy enough to start a fish store, and you might get to speak in front of some people. But it all started with guppies. If you look at a male guppy, which this is the male here, it's going to have a gonopodium. And they are a live bearer, much like humans are in other things. And so it uses its appendage to impregnate a female, and this here is a female, and instead of having a gonopodium right here, it has a triangle fin. So it makes that nice triangle shape. This does not have a triangle, and it's anal fin. So that difference right there will sex out almost any live bearer for you when it comes to mollies, guppies, platies, swordtails. The first thing that ever bred for me was a molly, which it's like a sister species to a guppy, and it can actually crossbreed with guppies, and you make muppies or gollies as they're called. Which, on a side tangent, those are all sterile. I've yet to ever meet anyone, because this is always the question that comes up like after a talk or something like, wait, I heard a guy's got those, and he said they weren't sterile. I've yet to ever meet anyone that has muppies or gollies that will still reproduce. The genes should make them sterile so that you can't keep that line going, and that's why we never see them in the hobby. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I've just yet to ever meet someone, and I've seen them, but I've never seen them be able to get fry from them, and I'm super interested in them because they look like freaks of nature. You know, the tail gets ginormous, so it's guppy tail, but 4-inch molly size, so it's just like on steroids, and it looks crazy. Guppies themselves, easy to breed because they are a library. You don't have to wait for them to lay eggs or anything like that. The females get impregnated, and 28 to 35 days later, they're gonna release fry that look basically like this, miniature versions of the adults. And if you, in your tank, put cover in one spot, fish are drawn to it. If your whole tank is covered, they won't be drawn to any one spot, and sometimes that can be useful in very advanced setups. Like, it used to be a popular thing, it's not anymore, but you would have like a pile of rocks, and you put an airlift tube to a sponge filter in the center of that pile of rocks. Well, fry would be like, oh man, there's the cover, and they go swim right into it. They get sucked into the airlift tube, and it spit them out on the other side of a divider. So you always had your fry separated from the parents, and the parents could never swim into that rock pile. And so that's actually how you can crank out an insane amount of fish if you ever wanted to. And that, but I like to use like a Mexican beach stone or something about 3 inches around, and the way you stack them should make about 1/2 inch, 3/4 pockets. And you just stack them loosely so that an adult clearly wouldn't like worm itself in there without getting stuck, but the fry can just navigate through it like a cave system, and eventually they just go, hey, what's down here? And they go, woo, onto the other side. If a male and a female get together, even for just like a day, she will give birth every 30 days for the rest of her life, even if she never sees another male again. And so that gets a little bit into a little bit harder if you're trying to make specific strains, and like, that first guppy we saw, you have to take the babies, never let it see another male, and then pair it up with the fish you like, because if she gets impregnated, it, I guess, downbreeds what you're trying to do. It doesn't replace all the DNA in there. You can still introduce another male, but it's gonna really drop your ratios of the male you do want. So if you can split them up fast enough, and they don't really sex out, you're seeing here, like, they really don't even have fins yet, till about 6, 7, 8 weeks, depending on how hot you're keeping them and how much you're feeding them, and things like that.
What size rocks do you use in a rock house?
So I like to use, oh, and I forgot to start my talk, by the way, with ask me tons of questions. That makes the talk way easier, and I want to answer what you guys actually want to know, but we need to add calcium to water. Why? Because something like these females right here, if they're cranking out fry all the time, they have to use minerals out of their body to make new lives. And if they're not replacing that calcium, that's where you will start getting a lot of humpbacks and stuff like that in your elderly guppies, is when they lack calcium for a long time, they start getting, curved spines. There can be some genetic issues too with that, but the most common is the hard water. And we'll talk about some of the live bearer diseases and why hard water is going to help you combat that anyway. So the difference between a guppy and an endler today, if you go to a pet store, is going to be something like this. You've got a fish that looks a lot like a wild-caught guppy, and that it has black dots, some specks of color, like there's a little bit of blue or purple, a little bit of orange, and a little bit of green. Usually there's some dots on it. This is a little bit line bred. It's called a black bar endler, and it's got that one little bottom swordtail on it. And then today your traditional guppy is going to be maybe something like this, where it's got lots of color, but essentially it would have looked something like this, and we've molded it into everything you've seen so far. All those different colors, eventually you can trace back to something in here. And even the colors you can't trace back, you mix colors and genetics make those colors. And so the endler itself is a different species than guppies. And today we're only talking about the normal fancy guppy. There's lots of other guppies like the picta guppy, and there's lots of micropicilia that technically are guppies as well. And people like, real guppy nerds would be like, well, actually, there's this too. But for all intents and purposes, the way you could walk into a store and buy, you could buy these, where a lot of those other things, they're so fragile and they really want brackish water that, I'm probably negative $700 on those things, and I still kill them. And I talked to other like crazy advanced breeders, like I got them to live for 7 weeks one time. Like I got a fry, and I got them as long as I kept them brackish. And the minute I lowered that salinity, they died off. So it's, this isn't the easiest fish, and we'll talk about why they're not crazy easy. Even though you hear guppies are for beginners, blah blah blah, like that used to be the way it was. But you can set up your tank with any tank mates that aren't really going to be big fin nippers, and realize that every fish has a mouth, and fish put things in their mouth. So everything will eat baby guppies, even guppies, so if you've got a really fast, so I put in 2 Siamese algae eaters. This is a 360-gallon aquarium. 2 Siamese algae eaters. Never saw a baby again until I got them back out, because they would just snipe them down. They were way faster, even though we had auto feeders, we're dumping food in, and the puffer's eating a ton. So you got to pick your tank mates carefully. So this slide taunts me, because I know everyone's looking at it going, oh god, we're gonna hear about temperature. Like, yeah, they're guppies, tropical fish. But it's only here to remind me that the closer you get to wild, you can keep them down in the 50s and 60 degrees. So that's why an endler live bear, which is not a guppy, can go so much colder than a guppy can today, because we've line bred them so far away from being wild that they no longer handle it. And why is that? Because most of the guppies we're getting nowadays in our stores are coming from Florida, which is pretty hot, or maybe Ohio, because it's pretty hot here too. But and then also Thailand, Sri Lanka, places like that, where they can basically use free heat year-round outside. And the guppies we're getting, something like this, will have never seen a day in their life under 80 degrees, ever, for the last 30 generations. And so we took a fish that could live in the 60s, and now, under about 72, it starts falling apart. And that's quite a bit different. And it used to be, back when it was people like us breeding guppies, instead of, we had big farms doing it mostly, we would keep them in unheated aquariums. In the 70s, heaters basically fried fish. They weren't as good, and we were scared of heaters, and so we'd run them at room temperature. And that made them a lot hardier because they could all of a sudden withstand 65 degrees to 85. And so you could just throw them in a tank, they'd do well. Throw them in a bowl, didn't matter. They did okay. And now you sneeze in front of the tank, you're like, I think it's getting ick. I think it's getting fin rot. And so that's, you know, the optimal temperature for a guppy you're going to buy at a store, in my opinion, this day and age is about 80 degrees. So how many for your aquarium? One of the most asked questions, and it's the question you can't really answer. What's your skill level? You know, are you running live plants? What strain are you even running? Like an albino strain of a guppy is typically way weaker because their vision's worse and things like that than a non-albino strain. So my recommendation becomes, pick your size of aquarium you want to keep. Maybe that's a 20 gallon, maybe it's a 5 gallon. I wouldn't go less than 5, but the more water you have, the better. And then get yourself maybe a trio, a boy and 2 girls. Maybe it's a group of 6, 2 boys and 4 females, so they don't run the females ragged. And let them populate, and your skill level will dictate how many fish you get to keep. So tank mates, some shrimp are a good one because they don't have really mouths to chase stuff down. Autocinkless never hurt a bone in anyone's body. They're so nice. Corydoras, I thought they were safe until I brought in a wild-caught group of orange lasers and I put them with my red deltas, and all guppy production stopped, even though I never ever saw them eat one. I can tell you any combination of fish can be done. It's all about odds. I would tell you got like a 2% chance of that ever working. But how do you find that out? Well, I was feeding, you know, the ones I didn't like to my cichlid tank, and they stopped eating them, and now they're reproducing in there. That's how you find that out. So when we breed a guppy in Sri Lanka, Thailand, stuff like that, fresh drinking water comes at a premium. Like it's just, you not all the time at the farm can you just turn on fresh water, and it might be more expensive. There could be shortages, things like that. So they typically will use some ocean water. Ocean water is free. There's tons of it. So we can just pump that in, use that at the farm. And salt water also has good properties like high pH, lots of minerals in it. And when you run brackish water, there is very few, if any, diseases because so few people are doing it. And you get the added benefit that when you take a brackish water fish and you put it into fresh water for a week before you ship it to America to sell in our stores, if it did have anything wrong with it, the fresh water, you know, it's like doing a saltwater dip on a freshwater fish. All the parasites drop off, you ship it out, and in theory you've shipped a perfect fish out. The problem becomes their kidneys and their liver and that type of stuff starts failing when they hit our softer waters. So like if they come to Washington, where they're going to sit in a PetSmart or a Petco and their whole system's sharing water and there's nothing to buffer the water, they just start shutting down. And you're going to see fish like this right here, where it's got some fin rot going on, all the fins are clamped. You can see this one a lot. This one's got some internal parasites, but it's all clamped up. And you may have seen this at a pet store before. It's all, you know, they call it live bear disease or live bear shimmy. There's a lot of, all these diseases get associated with live bears, even though all fish can have these things. But the one you typically, the telltale sign, is you see a bunch of mollies. Mollies are notorious for this. They're all up in the corner, they're all clamped up, and they're just doing this move, rocking back and forth, trying not to die. And they are dying because organs are shutting down because the water has now gone way too soft or way too less minerals. And so even though that's the same problem we have in mollies, it is the same problem we have in guppies. And so really, the live bears need the minerals, not the salt, but a lot of times it goes hand in hand. Like you bring in that, and it will bring minerals in, especially if you're using like a marine salt or something like that. And so there's been a lot of miscommunication over the years. You know, even so much so, you guys have probably heard people like, yeah, African cichlids are brackish water fish. Like, no, they like lots of minerals, but they don't have to have the actual salt itself, because enough salt will kill off freshwater bacteria. So it's, you know, chicken and the egg. Do guppies need salt, or do salt fix the guppies? So, you know, but erythromycin will take care of, an antibiotic will take care of fin rot, and it's because when you ship them, they come in bags with 300 to 600 of them in one bag that's about this big. And if I get in the car with Rob and we drive home and he's not sick, it's very unlikely I'll get sick. But if he is sick, I've got a reasonable chance of not getting sick if I keep my distance. When I get on the plane to fly home and there's 300 other people, and we're all sharing the same air. If one of them's sick, it's much more likely I'm going to get sick, and that's that communicable disease. It only takes one of these guppies to really start getting stressed. One of them bites its tail. Now bacteria is setting in, and I've had some pretty aggressive bacteria strains run through a bag of 600 guppies in about 4 hours. Then you've got something like this, sunken in belly here. Could be kidneys are failing over a long period of time, but a lot of times it's going to be internal tapeworms and parasites, and it's because when you grab a bag of 600 fish, it lands at a wholesaler. Last week it had wild cardinal tetras. This week it's got guppies in it. Guppies are opportunistic feeders. They'll eat anything. They go, look at that, some poop, I'll eat that. And they go and eat that. It's got eggs of parasites, so now they've got it growing in them. Typically, you're only going to see this 6-7 months after you bought that fish. You're going, it looked fine when I bought it. I don't get it. I've never introduced anything, and you'll think, you won't know what it is, but it is parasites, and it's consuming energy out of this fish. And so something like a general cure, which is praziquantel and metronidazole, something like that can clean them out pretty easy, not invasive at all. And I recommend that for everything because they almost 100% of the time are going to have tapeworms. A lot of people wonder how I get my guppies so big, because the females will literally be 3.5, 4 inches and just really round. The first step is making sure you're not sharing all the food with tapeworms. Let them in their growth period when they're young, put that body size on and not rob nutrients. So I deworm all of my guppies, even the ones I sell, and I would recommend most people do that too. Even if you're getting them from the guy down the street, nets transfer stuff, it's likely internal parasites are very common. And then this one right here is internal parasite, Camellinus redworm. It's like the hardest one to get rid of, and like general cure won't get rid of it. And it always presents itself with red worms poking out of the anus. It's really common in live bearers just because they lay eggs in the poop. The poop goes down, more guppies eat it. They get shared around. Yeah, have a scoop of my guppies. And pretty soon it's taken out a whole town. The eggs themselves will live for quite a long time in the gravel, so it can spread around a fish store pretty easy. And so much so that when I buy, let's say, guppies on Aquabid, almost every time they have it at this point. And you don't see it right away, because if you were to if the fish moves, all these retract up inside it instantly. They're just, triggered, boom, they're gone. So you have to use flubendazole fenbendazole, flubendazole, or levamisole. They're all kind of dog and goat dewormers and things like that. You gotta do a little bit of research on how to use them, but once you get clean guppies, they're so easy, they get so big, you should be able to have a thriving colony that will, feed everyone on your desert island forever. I want other live bear nerds around me, but it's a slow army I'm building. So I have to scour the country and try to convince people these are magical fish. I really do love them, and most people, I would say most people I interact with, they go, I don't do guppies, those are beginner fish. Most people that have done like a guppy tank and really bred them can see the merit of why it's the most popular fish in the world. In other countries, these are very, very popular. In America, I do this or I do that. I'm a trophiest specialist. I do this, and whereas if you were a guppy specialist in another country, they're like, oh wow, that's like being, oh, you're a beta judge. There's prestige in other countries where here, yeah, it's guppies. Yeah, I know, they carry those things, kids section. So, high-end guppies, where are you gonna find them? So, kind of an interesting thing, that tank how to set up a tank, this is actually the same aquarium. So this is that 360-gallon tank. All these fish live in there, and they're just crossbreeding and making cool-looking fish. Or at least I think they look cool because lots of color. Maybe not at this resolution on here, but they look really cool on my screen. They look cool. In my house, when no one else is around, they look cool. But where do you find high-end guppies? Typically, you're going to have to go on to maybe eBay, local clubs, search your fellow nerds out, or Aquabid. And not a lot of times are you going to be able to ever walk into a store and actually buy that fish. You might be able to buy like this one that's half black with a little bit of blue on it, something like this. You might be able to buy that at a store. But rarely are you going to be able to buy something like this without going to, the American Live Bear Association convention, or, a live bear club, or you go, oh man, Larry in the back, the guy's a total guppy nerd. He's got them all. You can go get them from that guy, but you're not going to be able to find them easy. Us nerds start talking. Who's got that? So we all banded together when we wanted to import the see-through guppy from Thailand. It was like the most magical thing ever. You basically have a guppy that you can see through, and you're going, yeah, so it's like a glass cat. What's so cool? You got to watch, like we, as nerds, we got to see what foods went through fastest and things like that. You could see the intestines, and then you got to watch the fry develop. So you got to know exactly, well, what point do they develop eyes? What point are they doing this? And so it was so cool to be able to see that process and help us with all our other guppies. And so I remember I paid, and so it's like a group buy of all the nerds, right? Like, we're gonna bring it in, we're gonna save ourselves some money. I paid $125, that was my portion, for 5 fry that were like less than half an inch. And you know, you were literally like just throwing money down a pit at that point. And then they grew up, and luckily they were what they were supposed to be, because sometimes that'll happen. You order fry, and they're like, yeah, just put fry in a bag. Like, they're not gonna know for a couple years, what are they gonna do? What do I feed my guppies? Oh, I should have built in like a sales pitch for all my foods or something. But no, I feed almost anything. Some of my favorites are actually frozen foods, and that would be frozen cyclops and frozen baby brine. For the adults, I like, you know, freeze-dried bloodworms. Frozen's fine too. And then I've got lots of fry foods, and they're opportunistic feeders, so they'll eat anything. But if I'm really trying to build a colony, I'll use something like rapashi food, so I can put in a giant block that stays water stable, and they'll literally eat for 48 hours straight, and I'll maximize what the guppies are getting. Now, in the guppy show scene, we can actually feed a guppy so much it'll eat and its chest will explode. And so, if you're running in the circuits and you're trying to like win, you know, your class, you can actually get what's called chesty males. Like you've power fed them so much that their front half, the fish, actually bulges out, kind of like, you know, breasts. And so that doesn't place because it means you tried so hard, you've actually made that fish worse. In a perfect world, they would have a small meal every 2 hours. But in a real world, like a lot of my tanks will have like an Eheim auto feeder, feeds 3 or 4 times a day, very small amounts. And then if I'm not out speaking, I would be feeding a frozen food in the morning and one at night. And you know, if it's a tank with 100 guppies, I might only put like 1 cube of each thing in, but you want them to eat lots of small meals frequently, not just big meals, because your goal is, if I eat every 2 hours, I won't get hangry and hate my family, you know? I will just be like, oh yeah, it's all right. But if I get a big breakfast, by the time it's 10 o'clock at night, I'm ready to murder someone for a cheeseburger. And
where can you get information about using these wormers?
that is something I'm working on, but I would say that, in my opinion, for levamisole, the best written guide would be from Greg Sage at Select Aquatics out of Colorado. You can read on his website. You can also buy it. It's a reliable dosage. The instructions are easy to handle. You can also hop onto a lot of the discus forums, but everyone's got, you know, it's like asking, like, okay, who's got the best cookie recipe? Well, you might have 10 great tasting cookies, but they're all slightly different. And who's the one that like, oh, actually, they thought their cookies were good, but they're not that good, you know? So you don't want to copy that recipe. So, what's that? The no bakes? Yeah. Make it so you can't. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make it so I'm using goat dewormer. Flubendazole is the liquid version of fenbendazole. And fenbendazole is a powder you mix in your dog food and it gets rid of all the worms and stuff like that. But the liquid version, it's much easier to control in an aquarium. You can go, oh, look at that, I'm gonna put 1 milliliter in per 10 gallons and it's gonna work, as opposed to with the powder form, you're like, oh yeah, I need 1/10 of 1 gram per 10 gallons after I crush it up, and then it doesn't really want to dissolve in water. You want to use something like xylitol or something like that. And so it gets way too technical when I'm like, hey, just pour this in. Anyone else? All right, I think I'm sweaty enough to sit down at this point. It's getting out of control. Thank you.
Well, but anyway. Yeah, he's so let's just get a jar. They got the big jar for samples.
Wait, Cory, what happened?
They put tomatoes on my stuff I requested no tomatoes.
Nuh-uh.
Right here.
Wait.
The only thing worse at Taco Bell than their lettuce is their tomatoes. There was supposed to be no, just to be fair, I'm not crazy, minus tomato, it says it on top. Minus tomato, right, Ruby?
Come on, Ruby. Minus Tom.